covered it a little bit earlier. So I'm going to talk about hedgerows and our hedgerow project here locally. So this is a CDFA Healthy Soils funded demo project, and this is our end of our first year coming up, like right this month actually. So this is a collaboration with Sarah Light, who you saw earlier, and Luis Espino, who's our rice advisor up in U County. Luis is an entomologist, so he's doing the entomology work here. Don't ask me entomology questions, I'm sorry, but I probably won't be able to answer. So a little bit about rice. How many folks are familiar with rice growing systems in California? Okay, so not a lot of people. So rice is continuously flooded in California, so that means that there's water pretty much on the field from May through like roughly September. So for hedgerows, it causes a little bit of a issue, right? How do you put a hedgerow in a flooded field? You can't. So that means that most of our hedgerows are going to have to go on the edges of our fields, and they have to go on permanent levees instead of the levees that get moved around every year. So our benefits are a little different maybe than some other systems. So one of the things that we're looking at is weed control on those levees, maybe beneficial insects, we're not sure yet, and then maybe improve soil health on our levees. Some of the difficulties with this in rice, we have to irrigate because we're not in a field. That means having to do extra irrigation, which is kind of a constraint. So in our particular location, we've been doing drip tape. So it's a whole extra cost that wouldn't probably be in an annual cropping system. The cost of labor is another big one. So for us, we don't have a lot of folks that work in rice, like labor-wise. So it would be extra labor that we don't normally have to pay for to get the hedgerow planted, for the cost of the irrigation, like having somebody out there to do the irrigation. And then also weed control. Weed control also, because hedgerows are native plants, it's a little bit more complicated maybe than doing something in a field where we know herbicides are going to work. But because these are on levees, there's usually a lot of weeds, so we do have to do weed control. We also have perhaps pesticide applications from our rice fields that would drift onto the hedgerows, so that's another thing that could be a big impact. So we started this project last year, so this coming year is year 2, and we only have this in one location. To my knowledge, this is the first ever hedgerow research done in rice in California. There's been a lot of other research, but it's mostly been in annual cropping systems, not rice, or in orchards. So this is what it looks like. It's on the edge of a field. I've got a picture of it later as well. So the field would be like over here. The hedgerow's here, 275 feet, and then we have 275 feet of untreated control. So that's where the grower is doing, whatever they would normally be doing in their hedgerow. So we set it up kind of based on some research by Rachel Long. So we have our trees in the middle there, our bushes or bushy plants on either side, and then deer grass on the outside. We also have poppies that we haven't planted yet, but we'll be planting this spring. That'll kind of fill in the middles there. So like I mentioned, it's on the edge of a rice field in Colusa. So that's kind of what it looks like there. I believe this is the transplanting day, so Hope was there. And I think, Heather, you were there too, right? So we had a lot of help, and Musaf, I think you were there. So we had a lot of folks. It was a lot of work to do the actual transplanting. You can see our drip irrigation lines that we had to set up here as well. There's a irrigation canal over the levee road there, and that's where we're pumping water from. So it is a lot of work. We mowed the area the previous fall. So normally the growers mow in the fall. They might also have to mow again in the spring, but we didn't mow in the spring. We just mowed the previous fall, and then went in with a pre-emerging spray before we did the transplanting. We did fertilize. So there's recommendations to fertilize the first year. We won't be fertilizing again, but we wanted to make sure that we had that the plants survived this first year. And then, like I mentioned before, the irrigation was really a lot. So we had to send somebody out there twice a week for half a day or so to irrigate. And then when it got hotter, we were having to irrigate even more. So again, for growers that might want to be adopting this, that is a big consideration. How do you irrigate? How do you keep the plants alive, especially when it's super hot? So these were the species. They're all California natives, and they're all the ones off the CDFA recommended list. So the arroyo willow, that's this one here. And we picked kind of a shorter tree because the growers need to be able to fly on their seed and their pesticides. So we didn't want to be obstructing planes. The coffeeberry, here's our bushy plant, and then the deer grass. This is a common landscaping plant, so people probably have seen this one around. And then the California poppy. And again, all this is based on research by Rachel Long, who's kind of like the preeminent expert on hedgerows in California. So this was towards the end of the first season. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's the deer grass there, the coffeeberry, the willow in the middle, and then another row of coffeeberry and deer grass. And then that area over there, that's the untreated control. You can kind of see also there's a lot of weeds, actually. So this has been a kind of an interesting trial in looking at kind of how do we manage weeds in this system, especially since we can't really spray things because I don't know what would kill the native plants. And they're not on those labels. None of the natives are. So we've been doing a lot of data collection. We have to do soil health for the CDFA projects, but we don't have any results yet. We've only done the baseline data collection, soil bulk density as well, and then because I'm a weed scientist, I didn't mention that, a big part of my research is always related to weeds. And for the growers, again, one of the main benefits would be not having to do weed control on a levee. So that would be one of the reasons that they might even want to do this at all. And then we took survival of the hedgerow species, and then a lot of insects data collection. So monthly insect sweeps of both the control and hedgerow, and then as we went through the season, we went out into the rice field as well to see if there were insects moving out into the rice fields. We also have sticky traps in the hedgerow, and then cup traps for crawling insects. So a lot of insect data. So again, this is year one, so preliminary results. But this is percent survival. So the coffeeberry, by September, a lot of it had, not a lot I would say, but we lost quite a few coffeeberry. Deer grass did super well. In the willow, we lost a couple as well. We believe the coffeeberry was struggling both due to the heat and perhaps also maybe the irrigation. And we did replant this fall, so everything's back at its 100% for the spring. So being a weed scientist, to me, this is like the most exciting data, but other people may feel differently. But here's our control and our hedgerow. So we were tracking grasses, broadleaves, which are the yellow, the straw, which is basically, we were counting any sort of dead grass matter as straw, and then also the hedgerow. So you can kind of see over the course of the season, this is month 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time we got to August, most of the control area was just dead grass. And then we saw more and more broadleaves, as you can tell, over time, especially in the hedgerow area. So the hedgerow area, I believe because of how we were managing it, really recruited a lot of broadleaf weeds. And I'll comment later on some of the species, but a lot of them weren't great species, things that we don't really want to see. So I'm going to be curious to kind of see how this tracks over the next few years and what we end up with at the end. So insect data, this is again preliminary and only the first year. Really the big differences by the end of the year was that we saw a lot more of our isopods, these guys here, in the hedgerow area. The control, we were seeing a lot more Hymenoptera for whatever reason in the months of July and June. So again, year one, it's a little bit hard to tell how this is going to pan out in the future. But none of these are really necessarily beneficial to rice. The sticky traps, we were seeing, this is the control on top and hedgerow on the bottom. Really the big difference was the diphthera towards the end of the season. But again, preliminary data, and you can see at the beginning of the season it looked pretty similar. So the diphthera are these like hoverflies. Don't ask me anything specific though, because I can't answer, sorry. But again, not sure if these are beneficial in rice in any way. Luis and I will be working together to kind of figure this out as we go. The sweep nets into the rice field. Again, we saw a little bit of difference in the middle of the season, but by the end, not many differences between the sides. The diphtheria seemed to be more as we walked further out into the rice field on the hedgerow side, and again, not really sure why, and again, not sure if these are beneficial in any way to rice. So we'll be looking at that more as we go. So to summarize, we really saw a big increase in our broadleaf weeds in the hedgerow side, probably because of the irrigation on that side. We weren't irrigating the control. But some of our species, like I mentioned before, aren't that great. So Kixia, cancerwort or fluellen, is a creeping weed that will creep up and pull plants down. It's really common in some of our vineyards and things, and it's not a great weed. Also yellow star thistle and field bindweed. So these three are really not advantageous and not really things that we actually wanted to see. But like I said, we'll kind of see how this tracks over the next couple of years. We also saw some spurges and mallows, but those aren't really, any sort of crazy weed species. On our insects, we did see a little bit of an increase in diphtheria, our hoverflies. Don't exactly know what that means yet. We didn't see any phytotoxicity from herbicides, so we were worried about that as our growers were putting on pesticides, but no phytotoxicity at all. The biggest problem we had was with our irrigation, and I would imagine that any grower that decides to do this is going to have similar problems. The rodents loved the irrigation system, so we actually caught some mice even in our pitfall traps, unfortunately. So they were just all over the irrigation. We had actually coyotes also over the winter, so it's just been a problem pretty much the whole time. So irrigation next to a rice field, maybe not the best thing. And then, like I mentioned before, one of the things that growers have to be considerate of is tree species. When selecting for trees, you have to make sure that you're selecting a short species. So again, this is preliminary data. We've got 2 more years to go on this project. The grower did say that we can keep collecting data into the future, and we might, do some more data collection even after that 3-year period. We've got a lot of interest. The growers are really excited about it. And we have a field day coming up actually next Tuesday, so if anyone's interested in coming out and checking it out, we'll be talking more about this next week. But like I said, it's very preliminary, very new for us in rice, and still learning, and we'll be learning more. So I think that's it, unless people have questions. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I know you said this is like a very innovative type of system for rice.
Yeah.
What have the growers' perspectives kind of been of this type of system? Like, are other people also maybe interested, or how's that kind of been?
Well, so funny enough, I've gotten actually a few phone calls now with people that were like, I'm growing a hedgerow, and I've had all these problems. So I think I've got 2 or 3 other phone calls about hedgerows now. People are excited about it, but there's a lot of issues with keeping them alive, and then also with random things creeping into the hedgerow area, and then also just a lot of questions about why it would be beneficial. Why would they do this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's still sort of hard to explain why they would want to do it at all. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. But hopefully we'll get some more data on that as we go here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you looked into predatory insects? They would be beneficial because
Yeah.
they would increase the biodiversity, and maybe some of the species that they introduce would sort of prey on the pests.
Yeah, so that's one of the issues though, is that we don't have that many pests actually in rice.
Oh, like the water.
insects.
If you mostly have the aquatic pests.
We have aquatic pests, and we have
Yeah.
armyworms as kind of the only major insect pest. And so Luis has been doing work with wasps on predatory wasps that parasitize the armyworms. But so far we haven't found any of those in the hedgerow. So we might in the future.
Yeah.
Could
Or
happen.
diseases, I guess. If there's.
Yeah, I don't think there would be any benefit for for
Or
disease.
plant diseases.
No. Yeah, we're kind of a weird crop in California, I guess, in that we basically our biggest problem is weeds. Yeah.
Or when I work with rice farmers, they're often saying like they hunt clubs or
Oh,
sell
sure.
blinds and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. They have been explaining to me, because I've tried to advocate for these type of hedgerows.
Yeah.
And they said if they put in a hedgerow, especially some type of shrub and tree type species, that's predator kind of
Yeah, I
ambush.
can see that.
And so the geese and waterfowl won't come in because of this hedgerow. I don't know how much truth there is, it just.
I mean, they may be correct. I don't unfortunately know off the top of my head, but those duck clubs make them like a ton of money, and so I cannot imagine that they would sacrifice like
Yeah.
how much money they get for a hedgerow. No way. Yeah. It's like, I mean, we're talking like $150,000 for like a permit for one person, like per season. They make a lot of money on that. Yeah. That's a whole other element that. Yeah.
But maybe the waterfowl get after other types of weed species and other.
They do. So the waterfowl have impacts, positive impacts, I should say, on the weeds. So they eat a lot of weed seeds over the winter. So, yeah. Yeah. So we'll see if this is something that people actually are interested in adopting. I don't know, but we wanted to have data on it just because, again, we're talking a lot about regenerative ag and all these sort of practices in California. But each of these things need to be looked at like in the context of the cropping system that they're going to be implementing. So, yeah, we talked about it last week. Yes. Yes.
So in your 275 feet, how many plants would you say you kind of had to replant?
To replant?
Replant.
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I think it was like 2 willows and then maybe about like 10 coffeeberry.
That's not too bad.
It wasn't too bad, but the coffeeberries still don't look that great. I don't know if we picked like a poor species choice or what it was exactly, but they don't look fantastic. They've been very stunted and just don't look that great.
Hmm.
Yeah. Apparently they don't like flooded conditions, so that's I think part of the problem. There's a lot of like standing water perhaps in that area. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Whitney, is some of those plants, do you look at different pollination, like different flowering timings along the rice? Maybe the coffeeberry doesn't flower during the right time.
Oh yeah.
Or coyote brush flowers October, November. You know, if you
Yeah.
had something flowering during.
You mean like
production
for
time,
bringing like a different
for
insect?
bringing in more
Yeah.
of your beneficial insects.
Yeah.
I know your deer grass, we like to see it, but it doesn't bring in stuff for on the orchards at the right time. It's
Yeah.
after the fact. And then coyote brush seems to be a good overwintering flower
Okay.
for parasitic wasps for Santa scale.
Yeah, so I think part of our problem in rice is that the beneficial wasps that Luis found, this is like a very preliminary data. So I think he only found it in the past year. So we didn't know about them when we planted the hedgerow. So we weren't even thinking about that at the time. I think he doesn't even have them all ID'd yet. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of like our biocontrol is like fish related or like other things that are in the water and not as much above ground. So it is still sort of confusing, like maybe, I don't know how the hedgerows get fit in other than people like liking how it maybe looks visually, or my greatest hope is for weed control and that they wouldn't have to do as much weed control on the levees. Yeah, we'll see though, if that pans out.
Question, we do a lot of like hedgerows but not in rice systems, and
Yeah.
I'm curious, we use mulch a lot of the time for
Oh, yeah.
initial weed control, and then eventually the plants get big enough and
Yeah.
I think play a part in that. And yeah, I'm curious, were you trying to avoid that to avoid like carbon?
No, so we did actually want to do mulch at first, but actually our problem was more like the timing of the funding that came in from CDFA. It was not the right timing, and we weren't able to get everything kind of in the time that we wanted to. We were going to mulch like the fall before, but we didn't get our money until the spring, and so it was a bit rushed.
Is that why you set up in the spring?
That is why we planted in the spring. Yeah, and if we were to do it again, like our original intent was to do everything, or do more stuff in the fall to kind of prep ourselves. But yeah, so if we did it again, we would try to get it started in the fall. And we were gonna do like tarp or something over the ground and kill some of the weeds as well. So it was a bit more rushed than I would have liked it to have been. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for the question.
don't necessarily need slides. So, Connor Higgins, work with Yolo County RCD, just kind of highlight a few of our programs. Kind of our center piece programmatic-wise for our ag programs is our mobile irrigation lab. If you've been to any of the grower meetings, you've probably heard me talk about them already. But essentially what we do is we do a free irrigation audit for producers. We'll go out to orchard, vineyard, row crops, as long as it's a pressurized system and not buried. We'll provide like a DU evaluation, distribution uniformity evaluation, to give them a sense of how evenly they're irrigating throughout their system. So it involves measuring pressures, measuring flows, looking for major leaks or plugs, and reporting back to them. And it's been a really popular program so far. We have funding until the end of this year, and we've had it since 2022, and we're kind of, we were supposed to do about 120 evals over the course of that time. We're there already, so we're kind of like a year ahead of schedule, which has been really good. It's been popular, and we've also been able to train up to do pump testing as well. So for like sweep, folks need pump efficiency tests. We've been able to provide that for free for producers, which has been pretty popular because they can cost, depending where you are, up to $1,000 or so. So yeah, been working with Heather a lot, getting folks signed up with Hope, and it's been a good popular program. We're looking for funding to be able to continue to do that, so it's not just the last summer doing it. We're able to cover a bunch of different counties: Sutter-Yuba, Colusa, Yolo counties. It was started out as like a cooperative program with Sutter RCD, and they've had staffing changes, so we're just covering the area now. And they've been popping up throughout the state too. So I know Slough House RCD has one. Kevin Greer up in Tehama has been doing this for over a decade, and so he's trained us. And it's been a popular program. So hoping that continues. Commodity groups are sometimes behind it. Right now we have funding with the Almond Board, which is nice. So potential with that as well. So that's kind of our flagship program. We work with conservation planning grants, so CAP-GAP, maybe some folks have worked with. We had funding to do carbon farm plans, nutrient management plans, and soil health management plans with that. And so far, by far, the most popular has been these carbon farm plans that we've been writing up for folks. The one downside to it is there's no implementation. If people have worked with CAP-GAP, it's just to get a plan created. But I think for a lot of operations, it's a nice forward-facing document. They can show how much carbon they're sequestering, how much greenhouse gas reduction they're contributing towards with implementation of climate-smart practices. So it's been nice in that sense. And then for funneling folks into HSP, the Healthy Soils Program, it's kind of goes hand in hand pretty nicely. We've also been helping with HSP and SWEEP through Solano County Farm Bureau and Colusa RCD. Really, it's been just application assistance primarily and soil health testing. So that's been kind of around Colusa, Yolo area primarily. And I think we touched on it earlier, but we have a Programs 101 meeting coming up as well. We're super inspired by that Glenn County one. It was really awesome, and you had a huge turnout, so we just got that set up kind of right after your meeting. So like a month's time, we have hopefully like 30 folks showing up so far. We'll try to do another push at the end, but trying to get a lot of folks in the door for just the organizations that have funding or can provide free technical assistance to producers. And we're going to do short 7-minute spiels as well, really make it grower focused. That's kind of where I fall in at Yolo RCD. We do a bunch of other work with restoration and conservation projects not on farm, but I won't go into that because I don't know as much about that.
So with the funding that you currently have, when will you be no longer, or do you have a cutoff date?
This is our last summer. We have funding for the mobile irrigation lab currently. So we're looking, hopefully WEDA comes back or the Almond Board DWR I know has programs as well every now and then, but yeah, we're looking for funding for it, because it's definitely been popular with producers, yeah. We've done about, we probably, by the end of summer, will have done about 150 to 180 evaluations for producers, and so far we've done 85 pump tests. That's been really popular just because it saves them money and they need it for sweep.
I want to say that every time I've asked Connor to help me with a farmer, he has never told me no. He has bent over backwards, like a test didn't run like great, and so he went back out and dealt with the farmer again and redid the test just so that he could apply. And Connor, I don't know if you knew this, but the Small Farms Conference, you were nominated for an award, or you were nominated to be in the running for an award. Somebody else got it, but I just wanted to acknowledge him at this meeting. You do deserve an award.
He helps us too. He never
Yes,
says no.
he never says no.
We drug him to Glenn County.
Thank you, yeah, I'm happy to hear it's
So
useful,
thank you
yeah.
for all of your efforts. We
For
really
sure.
appreciate it.
Awesome, thanks.
So, hey folks, my name is Rick Satombi. I'm the forestry advisor. I do apologize, I'm a little brain dead right now. I'm just coming off the back of a 300-person conference last couple days. Which, if anybody ever asks you to organize a conference that big, say no. So I work predominantly in forestry, so I'm very jealous to hear about all the irrigation opportunities you guys have, because we don't have any of that. And my program works primarily on basically growth and yield of forest products, a little bit of fire. We're doing quite a bit of workforce training, workforce development these days, so just getting skills into the workplace, as well as a little bit of research, as Betsy was saying. So I'm going to focus predominantly on this project. So Dan, I'm sorry, I think this is probably the 6th time you've heard this talk. But we do have other projects that I work on. There's one where we're doing like late plantation release, so that's modeling after the penny pines that went out all across the West in the 70s, where folks would cut their forest down, replant, and then walk away. Which, as you guys all know, as growers, you need to maintain your fields, you need to be maintaining the spacing of your plant as it develops. And so we have a lot of smaller sized landowners who have just overstocked, poorly performing trees, and we're trying to see if we can start to release them, or if we've kind of passed the threshold in age at which they have the potential to release. So that project is ongoing. That one is in Shasta County, actually, and we're just about at year 5, so we can actually go back and start to tease out whether or not there's a release response. We've got other basically spacing studies, trying to figure out ways to be more aggressive at harvesting so that we can increase profits. Our return interval is not 1 year. Our return interval is about 40 years between commercial harvesting, so we need to sustain the management for that 40-year period with that one harvest. And so trying to boost revenue in that first year, and then adjusting the reentry delay a little bit so that we can continue to produce economically. But another piece of the project, as was kind of mentioned, there's quite a bit of fields work, fire and fuels reduction, and management work going on. And grazing has really picked up as one of the key topics that has been of interest. And this is a joint project, so we have quite a few of our livestock and fire advisor colleagues involved as well as Rosie, who's our veterinarian down at UC Davis. And what we're really running into is that there's a lot of interest in using ruminants. We know grazing, we know cattle works in forest environments. We've known that for almost 100 years. But those are really on more of the grassy type fuels and less so the woodier fuels. And And so goats have really kind of grown in adoption, but where we're struggling is the ability to actually monitor and quantify the impact of those goats. And then that also translates into the cost, right? I can tell you right off the bat, a hand crew will cost you probably $1,200 to $3,000 an acre. A spray crew will cost you somewhere around $600. Mastication treatment, probably $1,200 these days, depending on where you are. Goats vary quite a bit depending on the size, the type of goat, and your market access. So we've set up a project. There's one site in Butte County, and we have a parallel satellite site in El Dorado County. So unfortunately, not one in Yuba County. We did try. Madison Thompson over at Chai Company tried to hook us up with the site. But one of the challenges was we really needed site control. That way we could make sure that we could apply the goats at the density we wanted, at the timing we wanted. All the other properties we had access to were not entirely university or partner controlled, so we were kind of at the whims of the landowner to determine when the treatment would be applied. But so we've been able to implement this project, and we're testing a couple variables. We're looking at goats, at sheep, at a flirt approach down the line, so mixed herd, and then we're also looking at applying this treatment year after year. What we've seen from some of the other work that some of our colleagues have done on Scotch broom remediation with fire, for example, it takes 3 years till you can knock out the seed bank. And so we're kind of guessing that it's going to take 3 years of grazing until enough of the starts germinate and then are browsed off by the ruminants. And we're hoping with that we'll actually start to tease out a beneficial effect of kind of keeping these less desirable woody species out. So some preliminary results. There are quite a lot of factors that are driving behavior. So as all the range and livestock people know, which once again the foresters are learning because our species don't talk back to us normally, so this is new. Bedding location has a huge impact, right? So where we're staging water, salt blocks, how we fence. We're finding that the goats like sleeping on high elevation, which I didn't even think about. But even those little shifts in contour can change the behavior, and they'll start to browse pretty aggressively where they're bedding, and not further downhill where I might want them to go. So controlling the paddock size, the intensity has quite a bit of impact. We're finding the animal type has some interesting effects on just how they browse, what species they go after. We're finding in utero and we're hoping that in utero training will become more of a thing. They haven't been great at the manzanita. It's we've tried different times of year, so closer to the spring when they're fresher, there's less tannin buildup. But even then, they're still not super into it. They have started to work on some of the whitethorn quite a bit though. The other piece, of course, is that we're finding quite a bit of damage on my crop species. So Dan Macon, who's one of the livestock advisors on this project, are having lots of lively discussions.
Really like that.
So, yeah, we're trying to figure out how to deal with this. And so one approach we're taking with this is just timing once again. So we've been applying the goats on more mature, so plantations that are about 7 to 10 years old. And they're doing quite a bit of damage, which for us is undesirable because now we've lost 7 years of time in growing this crop. And so now we have to reset to year 0 when we go and replant the trees. So instead, what we're thinking is we target even earlier at maybe 3 years old. If we do lose some trees, it's a lesser degree of growth loss that we're impacted by. And then alternatively too is just if we can browse them for 3 years continuously and then plant after the fact, have we done enough damage or have we created enough benefit to the residual seed bank that we're not going to have a lot of competing shrubs and grasses and forbs that are going to fight with our trees. So we're currently in year 2 of 6 of this project, but we should be having some interesting results come out here pretty shortly. Yeah, once again, so we did, one really interesting thing that we did see is some of the girdling that we're seeing. So as I said, most grazers have noted that they don't really like to eat manzanita. I think it's a little too woody, too waxy. The foliage is a little too thick for the goats to digest. But after a rain, they really seem to go for the bark, and we're not sure if it was a moisture thing, if it was a smell thing. And so we're actually doing quite a bit of protein testing on all of our plant species. So we're taking bark samples as well as foliar samples, and we're sending them down to a lab, I believe in Davis. And one of the interesting things is we found that deerbrush actually has it does. It has the same protein density as alfalfa, and so it's a pretty palatable, pretty useful species, and it's actually so high that they're having acidosis issues with the livestock, so they've had to supplement with some fiber. Other than that, okay, there we go. The other thing that at least from my perspective as a forester and as someone trying to find more tools in my toolbox that we can use out on the landscape, the deerbrush, which is this kind of light greenish color, and the whitethorn, which is that light blue, the protein levels stay fairly consistently high through the season. So that actually could give the herders an opportunity to move their livestock up the hill without loss of feed quality. So that could potentially help them with a sickler process of managing the herds throughout the year. Yes, we did also find there are some toxic issues. So this is a big unknown. We lost two goats, and we were able to save the other two that got exposed to this. But it speaks more to the larger issue of, we really haven't had these animals in forested environments. We haven't really tested them on these kind of higher elevation species for a long time. And this is across the entire foothill region. So, we know quite a bit of how goats work, down by the utility lines, down by the Chevron station, out in the bay. But as far as, Pacific Yew, azalea, coffee berry, chokecherry, things like that, we don't have a lot of data on what works, what's palatable, what will cause issues. And in addition to that, we're leading this up towards building a more comprehensive training program so that we can help landowners, be it NRCS, RCVs, so on and so forth, assess kind of the viability of grazing as a treatment on their project lands. So, with that, I'll just keep it short, and we'll take any questions if anybody has any. Yeah.
Okay, weak scientist question. How are you guys tracking the seed bank, or how are you gonna track it?
So we are doing strip transects across all the sites. We're doing 2 strip transects. They are 50 feet by 4 feet across, and we're basically stem mapping. So we're not tracking the seed bank, but we're tracking the germination response and the growth rate. Yeah. And then so because we're keeping the same exact measurements, we're doing before and after for 3 years in a row. We know exactly how each shrub cluster develops, so we're getting volume growth.
I still have the same question we've always had, is that I would love to have this as a tool to use with, our programs. But we need to be able to quantify, and that's the measure. How do we know when we are done? And how do you know when you should start? And that's been the hardest part overhead. Trying to get forest people and range people to agree on what and where this should happen, and the protocols to put them on and take them off. And that's why it's really valuable what you're doing. I wish we already had the results now, so I can say this is what we're looking for. I mean, it's like Paradise Fire Safety Council has a grazing festival, and it's since the fire, they've just been promoting using tools to get this fuel load management taken care of. So
Well, thanks, Dan, and I appreciate you hearing that, and as you know, I mean, we need more of it. Every site, every watershed is slightly different, and the results can vary a little bit, so we gotta start rolling out more of these so we can build our understanding.
Yeah.
Sorry, another question. Have you guys tried other species, or are you just looking at goats, like sheep, for example? Or?
Yeah, so we're doing goats and sheep right
Okay.
now. We're primarily focused on the Spanish Boer cross. Sorry, not a livestock person.
Yes.
Mostly because it seems to be the one that most of the grazers are using. Although I was just in Concow and there was a landowner who had a slightly different cross breed and he was getting better results on Manzanita. So I'm kind of curious about that now.
Yeah.
So what if the stand of trees is like 20 years old? Is there like an age cutoff when the tree stand? Because like it could look, if landowner knew how old their tree stand was, and then some landowners it might be a better fit for them if they have a more mature tree stand and they're just trying to keep the old trees.
Yeah, and so that's where we think there is a lot of good use. Right now, most of this is really focused on kind of the fuels, the hazardous woody shrubby fuels reduction component, which is why we're focusing here. But from what we can tell, it'll probably work best as a maintenance treatment. So you just kind of had a herd running in the understory continuously. The one thing about that is, so when we, in our strip transects, we cap the height at 8 feet arbitrarily because I figured that the goats can't reach higher than 8 feet. And you know, it might be a little higher, it might be a little shorter, but in practice, so in those 20-year-old forests that you're talking about, right, so we would be able to clear and prune everything 8 feet and under, but all the canopy in the crown above that would still, and has the potential to be really dense. And at that age too, we're also kind of thinking about how do we space the trees apart further horizontally. So the vertical clearance is important, but we also do want to start implementing horizontal clearance, which would be something more like a mastication or some sort of, or having a logger go in and take out a few of the trees. But then you would follow that up with more goats.
Yeah, you just like combine. You have to combine it with other stuff. It can't be a standalone thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're realizing.
Yeah. Every tool is really good at one thing and not so much at some of the other things. So you really want to layer them on top of each other.
And now are you using, what do I call them, like herd dogs or like guardian dogs to, in your experiments as well?
Yeah, we're using electric fencing and guardian dogs. So the electric fencing is nice because you can really densify and condense it. And it's a good way of getting them to hit the species they don't want to eat, so that they do some damage before they start to lose body condition. If you don't really force them in too much, they'll just kind of scatter and not eat as much, and then they'll start to lose weight. At which point we got to take them off before they're starting to browse the things we want them to eat.
And then what kind of density are you putting them at? I don't know if you put that on there.
I want to say 250 to 300 head an acre.
Pretty
Yeah, pretty dense.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So how often are you rotating? Like how many acres are you doing at a time, and then how long till you move into the next rotation?
So we are currently doing them in about 1.5 acre to 2 acre blocks. They are usually on there for about 4 days, 3.5, 4 days. And what we're tracking is the damage to the residual conifer trees, which is actually really hard to see here. But basically when they start browsing the conifers pretty severely, that's when we pull them off.
Are you working with any of like the agencies to kind of prove that grazing is important? Some of those skeptics of grazing when they're pulling some of these cows off, are you able to use some of your research to?
We're hoping to.
Okay.
We're building up to it. I know Dan Macon has been in touch with the Tahoe National Forest and helping them do their assessments of grazing damage or lack thereof on the landscape. Other Dan has also been working with us quite a bit and helping us quite a bit with figuring out how to best apply this. The one big unknown, which sounds like Sarah's volunteering, so I'm gonna have her come out and do it. Is soil penetration.
She's not here, so yeah, I'll be here.
That's the one big unknown. Other than that, like, we know it's a fairly, from a PSI standpoint on the hoof footprint, we know it's a fairly lightweight, not severely impacting treatment.
Do you follow Alex or Alejandro Carrillo? He's the one who took the Chihuahuan forest or the rangeland. Okay,
No,
he works a lot on natural seed bank. It's probably not real consistent to here, but he's got a lot of really good points. So I can point you in his direction. I'll have to find him on social media and I can show you. But anyway, it's kind of the same, that natural seed bank
Yeah,
concept.
please do.
And he uses
Be curious.
burrows. They found that burrows are one of the best grazers in that whatever desert
Yeah.
type stuff. So
Good to know.
yeah.
We'll put it on the list.
Okay.
What months, or is it just year round, are you grazing?
So we're targeting, right now we're targeting kind of mid to late spring. And that's really tied into the grazing contractor model, because they're usually down here in the valley or up in the foothills. And then the spring is kind of when they start to run out of feed and when they have more market opportunity to actually come and work on our projects. We have thought about pushing it earlier, but so with extension, we try to integrate all aspects of the field practicality into the actual study design, and so figuring out timing that makes sense economically for the grazer as a business model is really important, and so we really wanted to let them try the conversation on what timing would look like. I mean, ideally we could hit it in the spring, right, as things are flushing, knock them all down, and then there will probably be a second flush, and then they can come back again and hit that to really deplete the carbohydrates. But that's a lot of cost and probably not very good feed for the animals.
I have something to say. On the Small Farms Conference, they had, it's called Wildlife Safe Ranching, and they go over like the mountain lion, they go over the use of dogs, they go over the use of like electrical fences with, doing these kinds of grazings and such. But it's like an hour and a half, I think, long video on YouTube. You can YouTube Small Farms Conference 2025 and type in, or the Wildlife Safe Ranching. It's a great video on like debunking some myths and such, and how to tell like a mountain lion versus like a, dogs, a pack of dogs or something like that. But anyway, it's a great resource if you have anybody that, like, a rancher that asks about it. Thought I'd let everybody know.
Great. Any other questions? Cool. Thanks.
Can I plug her on?
Yeah, you can take that out. I think he forgot his. Is it not coming out easy?
They're really hard to get in and out.
I just didn't want to. We'll see.
All right, everyone. My name is Andrea. I took Dan Megan's position in October as the Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor for Placer, Nevada, Yuba, and Sutter counties. So I was excited for this meeting today to come expand my network and meet a lot of folks that I haven't got to before. So since I'm just kind of starting out, I'll give you a quick program overview, and then we can talk about some current projects that I'm working on. My clientele up to this point is primarily livestock producers in my counties, and I primarily work with cattle, but also do a bit with sheep and goats. And my background and focus area is kind of on animal health and nutrition. But I also work a lot with pasture management, targeted grazing for fuel loads, and then we have some climate change projects, which I will talk about here. And in addition to collaborating with other advisors and cattlemen's associations, farm bureaus, all the things, I've met a lot of great folks from agencies as well, and it's always great to kind of bounce ideas off of each other and see what we can collaborate on. Well, I'm working on quite a few research projects right now, since we're kind of highlighting the climate smart aspect of our program today. I'll talk about two different projects from like a bird's eye view that I've been working with. And the first one is talking about drought on annual rangelands. So this is something I kind of adopted as an advisor because I was previously the SRA on this project. But this is up at the Sierra Foothill Research and Extension Center in Browns Valley. And we have 16 different shelters that simulate heat and 50% rainfall. So we have little plastic poly shelters that you can kind of see these white circles. And so the treatments are heated, which is these poly plastic shelters around a big patch of grass that I'll show in the next picture. And then this structure actually moves down when it's raining, and it blocks out 50% of the rainfall. And then these black shelters here, they're like a mesh to simulate like a control. And then we have those ambient rainfall and then undercover as well. And so under each of those little hexagonal structures is what we call a dendra data system, and they're collecting soil temperature at 5 centimeters and 15 centimeters, air temperature, soil moisture, and then we collect annually forage production and species composition. At the beginning of this trial, everything was seeded, so we would think or anticipate the same initial species composition in all of these, and the project started about 5 years ago. So this data is collected and sent to a transmitter every 15 seconds, I believe, so there's a ton of weather data coming from that. And from analyzing that, we have found that the poly warming shelters are working. We're heating those poly covered sections by about 3 degrees Fahrenheit based on soil temperature. So this is kind of what they look like in person, not from a bird's eye view. But so those poly structures are being heated to kind of simulate a warmer climate, and then again we have those rainfall structures to come down to kind of simulate a drought situation. So really, again, bird's eye view. Of course, as anticipated, we've found that the hotter and drier plots, so those poly plots that are only getting 50% rain, are losing quite a bit of forage in a year. And in addition to that, we're also noticing increased rodent presence, increased bare ground percentage, and I would say that I've noticed quite a bit more weeds in those plots as well, a lot more fiddleneck, Italian thistle, those kind of things coming in to those really hot and dry plots. So where we take this onto like a rangeland management or animal production level is if our annual system is responding to climate changes with a shorter growing season, what management implications are going to be important for producers? So can we anticipate a change in stocking densities or timing of moving cattle to the mountains or to irrigated pasture? Those types of things are kind of what we're looking at. And we only have 3 years of data on this so far, but we do plan to just continue collecting. This year, what we're changing up is we are collecting the plots based on when they peak. Typically, we collect them all June 1st, but we notice in some of these hotter and drier plots, as I mentioned, they're kind of peaking in a shorter growing season, and we want to be sure that we're collecting data at the right time. So that's a very zoomed out kind of picture of these climate change plots that we're using. And then the second project that I'm working on that we're going to be starting this fall is researching asparagopsis supplementation for reducing methane emissions for cow-calf operations. So asparagopsis is seaweed, and it's like magical chemical component that helps reduce methane. Enteric methane production is called bromoform. This is what it looks like, and it smells like a very concentrated plant in the ocean. It smells terrible, I think, quite frankly. But a lot of the research that has been done to help us understand how these bromoform-containing seaweeds work in cattle have been done in a controlled feeding environment. So think of a feedlot, think of a dairy. Something is being mixed in at a very specific level, being provided once a day, can be measured, can be made sure these animals are eating, etc. But our question is, how could we implement this to a grazing system? A lot of folks have cattle out on hundreds, if not thousands of acres of rangeland that get checked or fed once every couple weeks when they can get out there. Sometimes even longer depending on the system or the size or where that grazing allotment is. And so we are working on using these two feeders, and we'll be doing this on mama cows and their calves. This right here is called a super smart feeder, and so this will follow the cows around to their pastures. They have an RFID tag in their ear, and when they walk in, it scans them. And this will distribute mineral mixed with seaweed, and it will measure exactly how much the animal's eating each time they go in there. And so the mineral is kind of our way on rangeland to get things into the animal. Since we aren't feeding them a total mixed ration every day, or feeding hay every day or something like that, we do put out mineral tubs and place them strategically to kind of move cattle around. So mineral is how we're going to be mixing seaweed into the mineral, and that's how we're going to deliver it to the cows. So I get to start training cows to be okay with this feeder this fall, so that will be a great time. I've done it with goats. I can pick up a goat though. I can't pick up a cow and force them to go in there. So to see, we have these preliminary data on feedlot cattle and dairy cattle for emissions, but this is called the green feed, and this will also be following the cows around in their pasture. Basically, same thing, they log in with their RFID, and in here will be some type of tasty treat for them, some type of supplement, some type of protein supplement that is sweet and delicious, and they get an allotment of that each day, so it scans their ear, and so they'll be in that it's kind of like a little head box. They stick their head in and their treats in there, and it measures their gas exchange, so CO2, methane, all those things, for the 3 to 5 minutes that they're in there eating their snack. So then we can relate the amount of seaweed that the cattle are intaking to their methane emissions and really put those numbers together for cattle on pasture.
Andrea?
Yeah.
So how do you limit that one cow that really likes it?
So there is a limitation. So if she goes in there again and again, it doesn't dispense more feed.
Okay.
So yeah. And they can go back. There will be those, and there'll be some who never want to touch it, and they get kicked off trial and they don't get their tasty treats at all. But yeah, that's a good question. So say if they get 3 pounds of that supplement a day, it'll weigh it before and after. So if she only eats 1.5 pounds and leaves, it gives that 1.5 pounds to the next animal, and she can come back again, but if she eats all 3 pounds, she'll just stand there and no feed will come out. Yeah, and all of this stuff, super technologically advanced. I'll be able to see on my phone which cattle have come in for the day or which ones haven't come in at all. So that's really helpful during the training process, but luckily UC cows are very docile and curious, so hopefully it will go well. But yeah, this is a 3-year study. We'll be looking at different levels of seaweed, different types of mineral delivery, and different classes of livestock, both cows and calves. So yeah, those are my kind of fun climate smart projects going right now. And there's your contact info. Any more cow questions? Yeah.
So when they go into is it just the head, or do you like box the whole cow?
Yeah, it's kind of just the head. So picture something about this size. It will have the machine around it that does all the gas exchange, but there'll be an opening, you know, and she sticks her head inside, and that allows it to kind of do the gas exchange. But her body will just be like in the chute gates. Yeah.
What about the gas from the other end?
Well, it's actually like people think cow farts are what contribute to climate change or, you know, methane emissions, but it's actually primarily cow burps. And so we focus on the methane that is being from like ruminal fermentation and what comes out when they belch. I mean, if you would like to research the other side, Ricky, like maybe you can come up with something.
I can build you a bigger box.
When I was in grad school, we like, at some point, like we were literally like collecting total fecal output. So you have cattle on like a hard floor and you like have to go scrape everything up every day and weigh it. So I can probably help you come up with something fun.
In the name of science.
Yeah, yay for animal science.
I know.
Sometimes I use those things.
We should talk about cows.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Taberner. I'm the District Conservationist in Butte County with the USDA NRCS office. And I'm pretty sure most people here are familiar with some of the NRCS does. There's a few things that are kind of new new to Butte County anyway. And I think they're spilling over into Yuba and Sutter counties as well. Just to give you kind of a whole, like a larger perspective of what we do. The two major programs we do and deliver right now through the Farm Bill are the EQIP program and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. The EQIP program is Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and it's kind of an umbrella program. It works in all different places on the landscape. It works in cropland, rice and orchards, range, pasture, and forest. And in Butte County, of course, we've had our share of fires. If you think about since the Camp Fire, the Dixie Fire, the North Complex Fire, Thompson Fire, Thompson Fire, Park Fire, Apache Fire. If you add all those up, about a third of the county as a whole is burnt down, but pretty close to, I think it's like 7/8 of the forest is burned. So we don't have a lot of intact green forest left, and that's why I'm very interested in promoting different things to fuel load management to work in the green where we can. So one of the things that we're trying to do now in the forest is this grazing and how we can work with landowners to use grazing as a management tool. There's certain things you guys can help advocate for. One of the things I would like to do is be able to cost share on maybe 800 feet of electric fencing and cost share on that with a small landowner so they can manage these goats or a flirt or something through their property. But that's just me wishful thinking. You guys think it's a good idea, you know, contact your congressman, Doug Lamal, for something like that. Just saying. We also work in lots of different range settings, and usually with range, it's getting water and fencing. Usually get water to a higher place in the property, and fencing to develop water throughout the property in the range ground, so you can take advantage of the grasses that cows tend to be lazy and not eat because it's too much work to get to. Then we have pasture. One thing I don't think our irrigation guy is here anymore. I would really like to see is we do a lot of irrigation water management for orchards with this distribution uniformity, and we cost share on this management practice. We don't necessarily do this with flood irrigation, and there's some relevant testing and management that could happen on a flood irrigation system, usually a grazed pasture situation. And when I first started with the NRCS, I was like, flood irrigation just wastes too much water, but since I've had some experience now, there is some benefits to flood irrigating, and we don't have that much irrigated pasture left in Butte County anyway. So I think at least being able to offer something like that through irrigation lab would be beneficial to the county. We just don't have it, and it's not something I could really offer to somebody, even if they wanted to. We don't have the tool to necessarily do it, or do it right anyway. Let's see, range, pasture, and then forest, like I said, with grazing, and then rice as a cropland. One relatively new thing we've been able to offer in Butte County for now is a water management system that measures the level in water. So sometimes when you're adding a substance or you're flying on a substance on water or on rice, it needs to have 4 to 6 inches of water to dissolve and be used properly. If you don't have enough water, the substance doesn't dissolve and it's kind of a waste. And then if you have too much water, it's diluted. So there's that aspect to the water management as well. Then there's also the trips that a farmer would do through the field once he's trying to get a field set up in the water on there in the spring. So there's a lot of things to take into account for. But this system, it's been tried a few different ways. Right now, Bucra is a special office in Bucra. Whatever Bucra stands for, I can't think of it right now. But
Butte County Rice Growers Association.
yeah, Rice Growers Association. Yes. There's a special office in there that's put together this kind of technical water management tool, like a hardware, and it's a hardware and software program. So it automatically uploads to a software program, and they can tell the farmer in real time what the water levels are and how fast it's going on. So I've been able to advocate for this, and the NRCS is going to pay a certain amount to have this installed. It's not much, but it more than pays for the management itself. So this is something that the NRCS is being able to offer to rice farmers that we haven't had much to offer in the past. It's usually just been a shorebird program flooding up, between November and March, and we pay them sometimes a significant amount, and it varies year to year. And there's also other competing kind of conservation programs through bird returns, and a bunch of different programs have been able to offer that. But for us, this kind of offering with the NRCS is relatively new, and I'm glad to say that Butte County's had a little bit of success on it. I haven't made a payment. We have had it installed, and we're trying to see what that, if it works okay, and if it's doable, if we can measure the net water savings. That's what NRCS likes to be able to do, is if we save something that cost us this much money, but what did we really save? And that's what we have to, tell Congress and stuff when they make these farm bill rules, what is actually working. So that's the benefit of us, and that's the benefit of trying to do this type of program. Another thing that I've done in Butte County with the rice farmer is a smart application of phosphorus and potassium. So I try to get nitrogen on there as well, but they said, Dan, nitrogen's too cheap. We can just put that with the irrigation water, and we're not going to apply that. But the phosphorus and potassium, they could. And what they do is they look at the harvest map from the year before, and they take this tractor with a smart boom that knows where it is geographically, and it just copies that harvest map and applies the P&K as it's needed on those parts of the field. How this came up is I was at a rice growers meeting in Ridgeville a couple years ago, and they were talking about they had the greatest yield contest, and you know they're able to get I don't know, I think it was like 160 or 180 sacks per acre, this crazy amount of rice. And then I said, well, why can that happen in this one place? What's the difference between that and the rest of the field if we control the whole field? So why not make those other variables match? And then a lot of times with rice, and particularly, you have a cut side and a field side of the rice because they're all flattened. So usually the cut side will be less fertile and the field side will have extra, kind of mix up for it, but we want to make that match. So sometimes when you re-level, you have to overcut and then try to make the amount of soils equal across the whole field. And then we could add the P&K as it's needed to build up these nutrients and then match, you know, as nitrogen supplied throughout the whole field with irrigation water. So that's been successful so far. I got a contract anyway. I'm still waiting to see this last yield map and yield percentage to see how good we did. The other program that's kind of new for us is well, it's kind of new now, the CSP program. It's went through several different iterations. I was with the agency way back when it was Conservation Security Program. It was a 10-year contract and not very flexible. And now we have a 5-year stewardship program that's much more flexible. We're still working out on all the, I guess you'd say, the land control issues like leases and that kind of thing. And in California, rice, how rice is farmed, a lot of times it's trading hands and moving from cousin to brother, parents, it kind of cycles through. But if we can show this land control can be maintained throughout the 5 years, there's a lot